Now, friends, who's got something to share? If nobody else does, I'll tell you my secrets now. But if anybody has something to share, oh, and I know that Rose, you have to leave in half an hour. If you have something on your mind, why don't you unburden yourself now, so that you can leave when you want to?
If I have something to share, gosh, I don't know. I follow the news for better or for worse, and what's happening on the American political scenario. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Mike Johnson does put to the floor a vote on funding for Ukraine. I'm concerned about what's happening there. My daughter actually just got back from Ukraine, where she and her husband were attending a conference. It was preceded by one in Krakow. They're both architects and focused on, in this particular instance, on affordable, sustainable housing. And of course, there was a real irony involved in focusing on rebuilding Ukraine. She said was they were threatened by bombs falling on them, having spent at least one night in a bomb shelter. But so that's on my mind. Environmental issues, of course, and what is happening with the Canadian Action Network as it participates with those on the international stage. That and I think I'll leave it at that for the moment.
All right, good. Well, at least I think I have a list of people here. So I can't show you all each other, but maybe you can turn your gallery window on, which I can't, and see each other all together. There's Rose, who just spoke, Louis Kreisberg, Lynn Adamson just arrived, Paul Werbos, Adam Konashevsky, who I guess is in Geneva, Gordon Edwards, Kolvina Chand, who's in India, and Lorraine Reckmans, who I presume is here someplace in Ontario, if usual. I'm going to try to put my clock here and hold it down with a Tibetan prayer bell. So if something rings, you'll know why. Okay, thank you so much, Rose. Now, who else has something to say? I think, Gordon Edwards, you say you got to leave in a bit, so please tell us what is uppermost in your concerns these days.
Okay, well, there's quite a few things of an environmental nature, but the mega dump at Chalk River, this large 7-story high landfill of radioactive waste, about 1 million cubic meters, is being challenged with 3 judicial review challenges going on right at the same time. It seems like an irresponsible example to be setting for the world, that we just pile the waste up but beside a river like the Ottawa River and regard that as a suitable permanent solution to radioactive waste. Especially when 19 of the 29 radionuclides listed in the inventory have half-lives of over 1,000 years, and 12 of those have half-lives of over 100,000 years, and yet the lifetime of the facility is regarded as only 500 years. So it's there's a real problem here.
Anyway, I'm impressed with the 500 years, because I don't know many buildings that still are standing that are 500 years old.
It's not a building. It's just a dump. It's just they call it an engineered near-surface disposal facility, but it's really a glorified landfill. And to say that this is going to be a safe repository perpetually is boggles the mind, you might say. Anyway, there is something else, however, that has a direct nuclear weapons proliferation angle, and that is that the consortium of multinational corporations that is now running Canada's nuclear facilities is building a number of buildings at Chalk River now that they're clearing out some of the most voluminous radioactive waste. They're building a new building, which is a tritium removal facility, and they're going to be selling the tritium. Now, tritium has limited markets, but it's very expensive. It's about $35,000 a gram, and as little as 2 grams of tritium can, if used in a fission nuclear weapon, can multiply the explosive yield by a factor of almost 10. So you can get a 10-fold increase in the explosive power of nuclear weapons by using tritium as a kind of a booster. Essentially what it is it's a small amount of tritium at the center of the bomb, so that when the fission bomb starts, the temperature is raised to such a degree that the tritium undergoes a little bit of localized fusion, and that's what boosts the power of the explosion by a factor of 10. The thing about this tritium is that it has a relatively short half-life of only 12 years. Consequently, it has to be constantly replenished by the military. And the danger is that by selling tritium, does Canada have the ability to make sure that this is not being used in nuclear weapons? Does Canada have the ability to ensure that if tritium is sold to customer A, that customer A cannot in turn transmit it to customer B, who might eventually be military? So that so I think that this is a concern that I don't believe the government of Canada is particularly alert to this problem. And why the government of Canada should be paying for the building of such a facility is beyond me. I mean, we don't have to do this. In fact, they're supposed to be spending money. The billions of dollars are going to this consortium of multinationals who are managing the radioactive waste inventory, but this facility is not justified on environmental grounds, because in the process of separating the tritium out of the heavy water that is contaminated, they end up releasing trillions of becquerels every year into the atmosphere. So it would be far better to simply store the contaminated heavy water rather than building this facility. So I just wanted to mention this to you because we have an ongoing problem in Canada of being a little maybe too self-assured that everything is being done properly when it isn't. And as you know, the plutonium from a Canadian reactor was used in India's first atomic bomb. It's quite, just to give an example, and not to single out India, but India would be happy to get tritium to help their nuclear weapons program because they need it to have the most bang for the buck, you might say.
Do they have are there other potential sources for them? In other words, a lot of countries have nuclear power plants. How many of them are in the business of selling tritium? Anybody else besides Canada? Potentially? Very few. There is the United States, in order to have enough tritium for their weapons program, and this is specifically for the weapons program, they asked the TVA commercial nuclear power plants down in the United States to produce tritium as a side product for military use. So the U.S. wants to buy Canadian tritium for military purposes.
No, they're using the Tennessee Valley Authority nuclear plants down in Tennessee. They're using those plants to produce tritium in their power reactors for military use. But it simply shows you that various militaries have an ongoing demand for a continuous supply of tritium. At any rate,
if the world were able to shut off all tritium, would that be an important step toward shutting down nuclear weapons, or not?
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. In fact, there is an article, fairly recent article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists about by cutting off the tritium supply, we can achieve nuclear disarmament without having to cut off the plutonium, without even having to have a shut off of fissile materials. You can essentially achieve disarmament in a vertical sense, but by simply cutting off the tritium.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have another way of getting there. Well, so that boosts the importance of your comments about tritium, right? I mean, it's not I thought of the tritium thing as kind of local public health issue, that we don't want to get tritium in our drinking water or something like that. But you're talking about something that is global in impact, right?
Absolutely.
That's very important, very interesting. Thank you for that. And by the way, thank you also for writing a letter to the editor, because I needed one. I didn't have enough for this issue, and you wrote one about the Chalk River thing, and we'll put we might even be finishing the magazine today. We're, for the first time in 40 years, Peace Magazine is behind schedule and missing our final deadline for publication, but we are about to make it, I think. So thank you, Gordon. And by the way, Sandy Greer is here, who's also very engaged with the issue of nuclear waste, etc. Do you have anything to add or to question about what Gordon has had to say, Sandy?
No, well, I apologize for being a few minutes late, so I missed most of Gordon's presentation, and I'm just still working actively, most of all with Tony McQuail, who's he and I met more than 10 years ago at the public hearings about the low and intermediate level deep geological repository proposed by Ontario Power Generation, and then so he and I
any change on that front? I mean, maybe do we need an update, or is there any change at all going on?
Well, okay, so my update is that now we're still now fighting against the high level radioactive waste DGR proposed by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, and we're fiercely fighting locally because sometime in the autumn, presumably not until autumn, a referendum will be put out to only one community at this time in Midwestern Ontario, the municipality of South Bruce, to vote yes or no for a site selection for this high-level DGR, but also sooner, it seems, and this is where the MWMO is very manipulative and playing games. So the other competing community to where possibly the site could end up, but I doubt it, is up in northwestern Ontario, where only the township of Ignis is given a vote, as well as only one single First Nation up there. But here's the problem, more than one problem. So now they're doing the referendum somewhat differently, and it seems to me from what I read in a recent news article, it'll happen sooner than the autumn up in northwestern Ontario. Meanwhile, the township of Ignis, who has the vote, is not even in the same watershed as where the DGR is being proposed. And secondly, a lot of the First Nations up in northwestern Ontario have loudly declared that in no way is nuclear waste going to be buried anywhere in their treaty territories. So I don't believe it's going to happen up there. And I've always thought, the pressure is going to be put on Midwestern Ontario, on prime farmland, for this to happen. And so I'm working with different people, and we're trying. Apparently, a new regional group is beginning to be formed, so I could mention more about that at the next meeting here. But so I don't want to speak about that because I just heard that a bunch of people are trying to get a wider activism in the region and in Midwestern Ontario to stop it, and to raise awareness, because and then meanwhile protect our waterways, no nuclear waste. based in South Bruce, they are doing what they can, but they have a limited capacity to do public education, and they're honestly focusing mostly on the referendum issue. But people need to know the dangers to the water pathways and all of that, and so it's going to require other people.
Okay, let me call on Gordon, because Gordon's still got his hand back up. What's up? You want to comment?
Yeah.
Gordon, you're muted. I think you're muted. Can't hear you anyway.
So I'd welcome any.
Interrupt you.
There you go.
Just finish what you're saying, and then I just wanted to add something. That's all.
Oh, well, are you about?
Are you finished, Sandy?
I think pretty much. I just wanted to mention, about the activism currently, and that seems to be building, and the timeline. And I mean, if it isn't stopped by the site selection referendum, it's going to be too late to stop it, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's never too late to stop these things, I find. We've had a number of things that have been approved fully and never happened finally. So it's never too late. However, I just wanted to add something, and that is that a lot of the townspeople in these areas have been given the false impression for over 10 years, for about 12 years or so, NWMO has been having monthly meetings in these communities. And for the first 10 years or so, people had the impression that the waste was simply going to be brought up and put immediately underground, and that it would be perfectly safe because they would never see it again, and everything would be protected. In actual fact, they want to build a facility at the site which they choose, where all of these intensely radioactive fuel bundles will have to be individually extracted from the transportation casks and put into much smaller burial casks. And in the process of removing it, there's bound to be some damaged fuel. And every time there's damage to the fuel, you get leakage of radioactive materials. So there will be much more leakage than people have been led to believe. And what's more is that the Canadian government is now being pressured by the industry to allow plutonium reprocessing, which means before we bury this stuff, we should get the plutonium out, because the plutonium can be used as fuel for nuclear reactors. And that's a very dangerous operation. Some of the most contaminated sites on Earth are places where reprocessing has taken place to extract plutonium. And in fact, there was an article written by myself and Susan O'Donnell, which was in one of the recent issues of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists on that very point. So again, people should be aware of the fact that the government of Canada is being led by the nuclear industry to a much greater degree than should be allowed in any healthy democracy. That the nuclear industry is basically putting forward ideas, and the government seems to be ill-equipped to even scrutinize these ideas independently. So they just simply take the industry's word as to whether it's a good idea or whether it's a bad idea, whether there are dangers or whether there are not dangers. And it's a very one-sided kind of message that government is not only receiving, but also giving out to the public. So,
Gordon, I'm delighted that we also now have with us somebody from the Indigenous communities, Lorraine Ekmans.
Oh yes, Lorraine, good.
We always want to have somebody who is close to the center of these activities. So Lorraine, I think if you want to take the floor for the moment.
I'll just finish with one sentence, and that is that reprocessing is connected with proliferation of nuclear weapons as well, because by extracting plutonium, you make it available not only for civilian use, but also for military use. So once again, Canada would be setting a terrible example to the rest of the world, not only doing something dangerous here, but doing something that would be dangerous internationally.
Thank
Lorraine,
you so
I'm
much.
really glad to hear what you have to say on this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Gordon. I just wanted to say thank you for pointing out the fact that Canada doesn't actually have a policy to deal with disposal of nuclear waste, and it is being led by the nose, by industry. And some of the strongest resistance that we see to nuclear development really comes largely from Indigenous communities. And one of the challenges, I'm working with Joan Morningstar, who's at Blind River, dealing with the Cameco uranium refinery almost single-handedly as one Indigenous woman. Her community, of course, is receiving funding. So this is what they do, is the bribery from the nuclear industry, sending money to community projects and programs, getting communities on side. But what's happening at Chalk River, of course, is also very divisive in the Indigenous community. What you have is unceded Algonquin land. So that land, there was never treaty for it. It was never treated for. And it has been a nuclear dumping ground since they built the Chalk River facility. And the people of Allumette Island, the Kitchis-Preene Algonquin, have been exposed to all kinds of nuclear contamination since Chalk River was built. And I think what the challenges are, of course, Indigenous people need support of Canadians. If we're going to advocate for Indigenous title, Indigenous rights, Indigenous capacity, we need support and allies in Canadian society. We've got a traditional governance system that has been interrupted and interfered with. And Canada created the Indian Act Band Council system to do its bidding, essentially. So we find a lot of chiefs and councils are maybe hamstrung by the Canadian government. And what you find on the ground are usually the traditional Indigenous people advocating for our value systems, which are protection of water, protection of ecosystems generally. And we find ourselves outside, often coming up against our own Indigenous, and I use the word in quotes, governments, because they're not really our governments. They're governments.
Lorraine, we have a question here from Adam Konashevsky, who in fact is welcome to speak for himself if he wants, but I'll be glad to. He put it in the chat, asking whether or not you have support from any MPs.
Well, I know that Elizabeth May has stood with Chief Lance Heyman at some of the protests or the press conferences. And I think maybe Charlie Angus, so the NDP and the Greens. But I think it's bigger. This is bigger than a political issue. I mean, Canadians, to me, I just think if you know it's unceded land, why do people stand by and watch Canada continue to perpetuate this extinguishment of Indigenous rights in an era when we're supposed to be dealing with reconciliation and truth? I mean, they're shoving this down our throat. And it's just, if we're going to be on the blockades, if we are going to protest and stop this development, then we need allies. And I'll leave it there. I just want to say thank you to Gordon and Sandy and everyone who's working on these issues. I mean, it's a really long chain. My part of that chain comes from Elliott Lake, from the nuclear dump in Elliott Lake, surrounded by the Cameco uranium refinery. And Gordon, I don't know if you ever saw this, but I did send a question to your office asking someone to do research on the total water consumed by the nuclear industry on an annual basis. And there's, I think on LinkedIn, there's some nuclear hack who's doing this advertising for the nuclear industry. And I pointed out that a lot of water is consumed, and he just sort of blew me off because there's no data, right? And I'm just wondering, for Indigenous people, that's a critical piece for us, is the water, right? How much water is taken up by the nuclear industry on an annual basis so that we can prove it is not a solution to climate change. And it's the altruism of Canadians that is working against them. because the industry says, oh, this is a solution for climate change. Let's get the small modular reactors going. And everybody feels good about saving the planet. You know, and that's, I think, to counter that argument, we need to use the water. So miigwech, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Okay, by the way, Anna Kolonishevsky, I expect I think you're probably in Geneva, or maybe you're in Poland, or who knows. But if you, please feel free to join this. Oh, you're in Switzerland, just Geneva, or near. Come join us, and your thoughts on this would be of interest, I think. And also letting you know, oh, he says there's noise here, so he's just listening. Okay, well, all right. Sandy Greer, you want to add something? Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to add, and if Gordon has anything to clarify on this, is the other issue about water pathways. Aside from, I totally believe that the radionuclides will be released into the aquifers at some point in time, and absolutely, it's inevitable. And so, therefore, but also, as per what Lorraine raised, I also worry about how much water is being extracted, like would be extracted if that DGR were constructed out of the aquifers and impacting on the farmland and the water available to the farmers. So there's just nothing about really the impact on water being extracted in terms of the DGR as well. And I don't know if Gordon has any knowledge on that specific point.
Here I'm again interpreting for Adam in Switzerland. He says, I would suggest connecting with France and Japan concerning nuclear waste and security. He mentions in Japan, Naoto Kan in particular. So check your chat box when everybody, if you have any reason to want to pursue this idea. And if I interrupted, Gordon was maybe about to comment. Do you want to add anything, Gordon? Unmute, please.
Joan, you had something to say?
Well, thank you. You know me, I'm always listening and always thinking of how to rectify a problem or come up with a solution. So I was wondering if the nuclear industry is influencing the Canadian government, would it be feasible for a group like this to contact the government and say, whenever there's a report or a presentation by the nuclear industry, can we have an opportunity to comment?
I would not want us to try to do anything as an organization. I think of this as a network to put people together. Now, if everybody here and everybody wants to get together and put together an action, any kind of action, I heartily encourage that. Do it as some independent movement, because if we get to the point of making decisions for the whole organization, we have to have ways of consulting and discussing and debating and procedures like that, which are way beyond anything I can manage. But I totally agree that working together as a group is very important. So you can, we have our own website. It's password protected. The word love is the only password we will need. And it's lowercase, and you can get right in and use that as a place to organize any kind of project that you want to do. You can speak to each other there. And then if somebody wants to, when Joan Kerr or anybody else wants to take the initiative in organizing a project, I totally endorse that idea. It's beyond me and beyond any democratic procedure that I can manage for this organization as such. Okay. I don't want to be authoritarian, but I really can't handle all of that. Gordon, yes.
Yeah, I did like Joan's idea. I think that's something we have to push for more democracy. The democracy really is being bypassed here completely, and there is no democratic channel to work with this. I just wanted to mention two things. That is that recently there was a nuclear summit sponsored by the International Atomic Energy Agency in Brussels, Belgium, and the 600 non-governmental organizations signed a statement. Climate Action Network people signed a statement saying that nuclear is not the strategy that one should adopt for fighting climate change, contrary to what the government of Canada has been told and has swallowed hook, line, and sinker. I can send you that information.
Gordon, I think that's a very interesting comment. Could you elaborate? Who did this and what, is this something to make a big story of? Because it sounds like any evidence that goes against the general argument that nuclear is going to be saving us from global warming is something we ought to pay attention to if it's got any legs, so to speak.
Yes, well, this is the this is the Nuclear Climate Action Network in Europe. There is also Climate Action Network in Canada. Climate Action Network in Canada endorsed this call by Climate Action Europe. And there were groups from around the world, not just from Europe and not just from North America. There were 130 groups in Canada in particular who signed on to this statement, counteracting the claim by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which we forget sometimes is a promotional agency. Their primary mandate, if you look at the mandate of the International Atomic Energy Agency, at the very beginning, it's very clear that their primary mandate is to expand nuclear power worldwide. That's their primary mandate. The idea of protecting the environment or protecting security is secondary to the main goal of expanding nuclear
but now this
technology. But this Climate Action Network statement was arranged to be simultaneous with the nuclear summit, and it was released at that time. And I can send you a press release that we wrote on that if you just contact me at my email address, which I put into the chat. But the bankers were also there, some of the largest banks, and they poured cold water on this idea. They said, we cannot finance this. They said there's no sensible business plan for paying for all these nuclear facilities. So in fact, the only source that is going to be drawn upon for building all these nuclear plants they're talking about is public money. So they're really talking about getting taxpayers to pay for this because private capital will not do it. They will not touch it. And the banks were quite firm on the fact that they would not invest in this unless there was a much better business plan. So there's a great deal of fictitious suggestions that this is an economical way to go. It's actually one that would bankrupt the economy to try and build all these nuclear plants they're talking about. It's actually physically impossible. It takes too long and it costs too much.
Okay. Is there anything that would be comparable in credibility that, from scientists? In other words, economists and business bankers and stuff, that's certainly a very important ingredient in the debate, if there is a debate, where there is a debate. But if Adam is saying something, I'm thinking if we had a statement reflecting the same point of view from scientists saying that the plan would not suffice would not come to fruition early enough or could not be done in time or whatever to even handle the climate change issue. I think that would be an important part of the ingredient. Now I see here Adam Konashevsky is saying, I can put you in touch with some groups fighting nuclear industry disinformation in the UK, France, Japan, and some in the US. The Economics of Nuclear by A. Marie Lovins. Okay, very good. Thank you, Adam. And anybody else on this point? I would say the biggest people in this discussion now are people who are concerned about climate and who say we have no other reasonable, we can't do it quick enough, the switch out of fossil fuels, so we have to do nuclear, whether it's too expensive or not, something like that. That's what I hear, and I'm just saying that has credibility. I mean, people believe it, whether it's true or not. Lynn.
The point that people never talk about when they promote nuclear is that it's not going to do anything to cut our emissions in half by 2030. We actually have to stop using fossil fuels, and the renewable path and conservation, which is very underused, are readily accessible for us to go, and we should be ramping them up as fast as possible. And there's a letter that Angela was collecting signatures for tripling renewables by 2030, which came out of the COP 28 as well. So
Yes, and
but you know, any nuclear plant is going to take like a dozen years to build it, I think, something like that, and it is not going to help us achieve what we need to do. And then once we've been able to do it with renewables, why would we build nuclear? I don't know if other people want to add to that.
It's certainly a valid point, but there's more to it than that as well. There's the reality is that even with all the fastest we can go to getting out of fossil fuels, it's still got it. If we cut it off today, it's still too late. Sorry, we have to use geoengineering, and that is my only statement on this matter, because I want to go to Paul Werbos, who's got his hand up, and two others after him. Oh,
yeah, it makes me feel really worried that the best dialogue we have in the human species about how to prevent climate extinction is totally wrongly guided in terms of what the targets are and totally misinformed in terms of technology. Certainly people here would believe the nuclear industry has basically been lying to people for 40 years and getting away with it. And the power of money to perpetuate lies, it's not only the nuclear power industry. When I look at the European policies, it really scares me how totally out of touch with reality all of the decision makers are all over the world. I'm not sure what to do about it. I've been trying to do what I can in my own little way, but it really is scary how implacable the forces of lies really are in our society. It's not enough just to speak truth. In terms of the specific energy things, one of the groups I've worked with is IEEE. The Power and Energy Society of IEEE actually knows more about generating electricity than every one of these politicians combined. And I have served for many years on the policy committee, the IEEE USA Policy Committee, for the power and energy area. And we have debated exactly this. We have had representatives of the nuclear industry come in and make claims. But it was my job for many years at the Department of Energy to evaluate these claims from the left and the right. We had access to all of the technical information, and it was easy to show that they lie in Canada, they lie in the United States, they lie everywhere. There are people who say that sending plutonium around the world has no proliferation implications. It's really incredible. There are people who look at what's happening with North Korea and South Korea, and they want to increase the nuclear technology like there was no implication. And they say, don't worry, there's no security implication. There's no worry about nuclear weapons going off and nuclear war. That's been abolished. We laughed at it, and our laughter made it go away. But if you lived in Japan and knew what was coming, you wouldn't laugh so easily. The bottom line is we also have alternatives. They tell you renewables won't do it. It turns out that the United States and Chile, between them, have developed and proven new solar technology, not relying on solar panels, relying on thermal sources. We have 3 vendors in the United States who can supply the relevant high efficiency engines to convert heat to electricity. We don't need the damn nuclear power. We got something cheaper and safer, and it's special interests in politics that are blocking it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you, Paul.
I must say that this is very exciting to listen to. I thought some of these issues were mute, and they obviously are not. And I will try to find out what's going on in the States, and or at least inform other people that it's worth investigating what's going on.
Great.
Thank you.
Bless your heart. I see here that Adam Konashevsky says he has an article to share with the whole group. Well, now that's always a question of how best to share things, because you can post stuff on our on the members' website. That is to say, go to savetheworld.ca, and there up at the menu bar you see a place that says members only. You click on that and you get asked for a password to get in, because that's for people who want to keep secrets among ourselves. If we have some information that we don't want everybody to have, but we want to have each other have it, then you can post it there. But if you want everybody to see it, I think the best place to put it is in a place that's much more public and that we try to get people to visit. And in this case, I would say go to savetheworld.ca, and up in the menu bar it says to discuss the global threats. So might be wanting to click on the one on the threat called radioactive contamination or radioactive risk, or if you want to talk about the issue as it relates to climate change and the issue of whether or not we need nuclear power for climate change, you could put it there in the section on global warming. We have a page for global warming. Each of these threats has its own discussion group, a comment column, which you can add to. If you go to that page and just scroll down, there's a comment column, and we encourage, not only encourage, but I implore you to use it, because it has been so expensive to set up this website, and it's not getting used enough to make me feel that my money was gone to a good cause. So go use the damn thing, please. Lynn Adamson, you got your hand up, please. You want to say something?
Okay, no, I was just going to ask you, you can share separately with me if you want, but what the password is to get into that section. And I had a question for Paul, just about what that technology was that he just referred to.
Mm-hmm.
So two questions. I don't know if you want to let me know the password for the members section somewhere.
Oh, love, lowercase. Yeah, and I'm never going to change it. So if other people bust in and invade our territory, we'll live with it, because
Okay.
I want it to be pretty simple.
Thank you.
Okay, love.
Yep.
Yeah, Paul, you're always encouraged to expand if you want to answer her. No, but with your microphone on, please.
My personal problem is there's just so much data. I don't know what to do with it all. But in regards to this new technology, there's a simple site out there, build-a-world.org, and there's a climate block there. And they agreed to post some of the papers that came from our IEEE study of these technologies.
Mm-hmm.
There is a much more complete IEEE site. I sometimes send out the URL. I might have sent it to you, Meta. I'm not sure. But the real question is, what is this new technology? It turns out, the quick summary is, the most important new technology is Brayton energy technology, which can convert heat to electricity at much higher efficiency than what any of us really thought was possible before there were major breakthroughs. There are now 3 major vendors One of them is called Brayton Energy, Brayton, Brayton Energy. That's an easy Google. They're commercially the least far ahead, but scientifically pretty far ahead with NASA funding. Then there is General Electric, and then there is a company called Heliogen, Heliogen. GE and Heliogen have products. I suspect you could just order them in quantity tomorrow. And I've been hoping we could build up some kind of a consortium to combine this new heat conversion technology with the vast power tower solar farms, which are already being constructed in Chile. And Chile has had a group called the Solar Energy Research Consortium. I was a very active member of that 2 years ago. And if you combine their solar farm technology, not solar panels, generating heat and converting heat to electricity, that technology by itself would be enough to make a revolution in the world if you just combine those two things.
In other words, let me guess. Now you're talking about, I mean, normally the only thing I know of that we use now is turbines, right? Is there something else? And then you've got this, how many things are already familiar to us, and what is the new technology that you're referring to as a substitute for ways of converting heat to electricity?
So one way of describing it is that we already have this kind of a solar farm with the wrong engine inside. It's like you yank out your old turbine and put in the new turbine. So somebody in the United States came up with a new turbine that has twice the efficiency of the old turbine. The old turbine was costing 10 cents a kilowatt hour for the electricity, which is actually not so bad. But now you get twice as much electricity from the same heat, so you cut the cost in half, which is to say you get twice as much electricity. 5 cents a kilowatt hour out of a solar farm, you don't need nuclear. God, you don't even need coal. And what's more, an additional technology they have proven in Chile is that once you've got the heat, you don't need batteries to store it because they have thermal storage, and storing heat is cheaper and easier than storing electricity. And the bottom line is, if you take the new solar, you take the thermal storage, you combine it with the Brayton engine, and you combine it with these big solar farms they already have in Chile. They have the heat source. You just put in a new turbine in the heat source and storage, and all of a sudden you've got electricity which can track demand. It's better than base load. It's better than nuclear. And it's available now. I was hoping in January we could start doing a demonstration in South America. And I have friends there who I thought would get it started. But now the politics in Patagonia, in Chile and Argentina, oh God, that politics is going out of control. And it might work, it might not. In January, I thought it was certain. They made promises, they have capabilities, and all of a sudden I haven't heard anything. And there are people I know in Texas who are willing to try it in Texas, but they won't contact the people in Chile. I don't know why. It's something about, human relations. Maybe it's just my lack of skill in human relations.
Carry on, Paul. Don't give up. Persevere. Thank you for letting us know about this.
Right, yeah.
Okay, Lorraine Ekmans, I think you've had your hand up a long time. If Paul, if you're through, I see Joan Kerr is wiggling her thumb. That means enthusiastic thumbs up. Is that what it means? Okay, I'll have Lorraine, and then if you want to speak again, Joan, you can. Lorraine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Meta. So I just want to go back, I think, to something that we touched on earlier, and that was money. So we're talking about nuclear energy and ways to sort of counter their arguments, and it's water, the environment, weapons, and money. I mean, those are the four, I think the four tracks. I wanted to share that in Elliott Lake, probably about 10 years ago, a uranium mining company showed up and started a lot of hype around a really economically depressed area. So Elliott Lake was shut down And 3,500 people lost their job on the same day when those mines closed. So they were quite excited to see this mining company come around with a plane and, you know, making all these promises. And it was really interesting to watch because I knew the grade was so low in that ore body in Elliott Lake that it's just not even economically feasible to mine it. And what it turned out to be actually was these developers were mining the stock market. You know, they were just creating all this hype and getting investors and getting money with no real intention of mining, actually, right? It was just kind of sick. And when you think about subsidies, I mean, the nuclear industry has been subsidized in Canada from the government since day one. The whole operation at Elliott Lake was funded by subsidies. There was the taxpayer who paid for that in the interest of providing electricity. You know, it's this altruistic thing. They use it against us every time, right? Oh, yes, we're providing energy, you know, for Canada. And so we're going to pay for it. Canadians are going to pay. And these guys make off like bandits. These nuclear moguls made billions. They just walked away with billions of dollars of the taxpayers' money. And the game hasn't changed. And I think we've got to follow the money. We need to know, you know, I mean, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, I don't know their financials. Maybe Gordon does, but that is another argument. I think in these tough economic times to show Canadians that we can't afford this kind of, you know, boondoggle again. And we've got to focus on, you know, what they say is follow the money, because they're in our pockets and they're in our pockets deep. Gordon.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, Lorraine, I was going to say something similar. The nuclear industry is really trying to grab as much money as they can because they know that trillions of dollars are being put on the table to fight climate change. And they are organized much better than renewables or anything else, that they can have access to government officials very easily. And they say, we just got to grab that money but while it's on the table, because if we don't grab it, somebody else is going to grab it. And in fact, it's there's not a single small modular reactor operating anywhere in Western world. And the only one that was close to being commercial was one called UAMPS in the United States, and it collapsed recently because of the price escalating. And here in Canada, we're now building a small modular reactor at Darlington, and nobody is keeping track of the actual cost escalation, which is going to take place because it's all public money. And because it's public money, it's not going to be subject to the usual market forces. So this is a real problem that the nuclear industry has stalled for the last 25 years. There hasn't really been any real growth in nuclear capacity for the last 25 years. And as a result, the share of nuclear electricity in the world electricity market, the share has gone down from 17% 25 years ago to about 9% today, and it's still going down. So to call this a solution to the climate crisis is really crazy. But I just wanted to say to people that I've recently did a video which I can send to you for the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War on the nuclear illusion and why it's not really a viable solution. I'll be glad to send that to you if you just drop me a line at my email address, which I put in the chat. It's just simply 4 letters, ccnr@web.ca.
How about putting that into, I don't know, you know, you may have some concern about publication rights or something that you don't want to.
No, there's no concern there.
But why not post everything anybody wants to have seen on our website comments page? You can put a whole long article in there, and somebody has a chance of reading it. And if you put it in the chat here, you're not going to get any answers.
Right, that's true.
From maybe 1 or 2 people who are at this meeting. The chat will not be seen by the general public.
No, of course not.
put it into everybody. If you have something that you want to say publicly, wide, and on a soapbox, put it into the chat, the comments column as a comment. You can put a long article in there and put it in on whatever page of our website you think it's relevant to. If it's relevant mostly to radioactive risk, put it on that page. If it's relevant to war and weapons, put it on that page. If it's relevant, you could put it on both of them if you want, if there's an overlap. If it's relevant to mostly relevant to climate change, put it there. And I guess you could put them all three. I hadn't thought about that, but it's a little bit of work. But that way you have, and then go look at what other people have said on those pages. I want those comments pages to be more used. They're not getting the traffic that they should. Well, I'm not getting my money's worth because nobody's using them enough. And it may be because the website is not all that user-friendly, and I don't know what more I can do to make it user-friendlier. But go try to use it and be a good sport and help me out. Okay.
I'm sorry, Matt. I'm going to have to cut out now, but thank you very much, everybody. Some interesting comments for sure.
In a few days, Gordon, at the board meeting, because Gordon is on the board.
Yes.
And Adam Konashevsky in Switzerland and Paul Werbos are all on the board. So thank you all, and I'll see you,
everybody.
on the 9th for our board
Bye-bye.
meeting. Thank you. Now, if we have exhausted the subject of all of this radioactive material, I will take a few minutes to tell you about a project that Project Save the World is doing. And I guess I haven't consulted sufficiently before getting involved with it, but I'm deeply into it, and I want to now bring you up to date on where it stands. You know, one of the most important things that we could be doing is making people aware that indeed it is too late to stop global warming by simply reducing carbon emissions. There is no way in the world now that we can make that work. It's too late. 30 years ago, it would have worked. Now it is not going to work. We have to do something to actually remove carbon from the atmosphere or shade the earth in some way from the incoming sun rays so that we at least reduce the heat long enough to help us, give us time to do the carbon reductions that we do. Of course, we have to do the carbon reductions. We have to stop the emissions, but it is just taking too long, and we can't. If we did it today, it would still be too late. We have to use now, whether you like it or not, we have to use technological solutions to cool the planet or remove the carbon from the atmosphere that's already been put up there for the last 200 years. And that's called geoengineering. I just did a show, a forum with Gwen Dyer. If you've been in Canada alive for 40 years, you will remember the name, and you might even recognize it because he is a journalist who, last I heard, had syndicated columns in something like 60 newspapers around the world. So there are a lot of people read Gwen Dyer, and in 30 years ago, he was on every week on your TV set. And he and I have known each other since those days. I put his picture on the cover of Peace Magazine 36 years ago. So we've sort of been acquainted a long time. And he came to lunch the other day to just get back in touch. But then we decided to do a talk show, a forum video about his work on geoengineering, and we did, and it will be it's ready to post probably today on our website and on YouTube, and I am about 2/3 through editing the transcript of of our conversation. And that transcript will be in Peace Magazine, which is the reason we're late going to press. One of the main reasons we're late going to publish the magazine this time, because I couldn't do it in time to get it in, and I thought it was worthwhile. So the magazine will be heavily oriented toward a discussion about geoengineering, and that's the purpose of his book. Before I even heard that he had written a book about geoengineering. By the way, you can buy the book. I have it on my iPad, and it's called Intervention Earth. And it's definitely worth reading. It's a terrific book. He spends the first half of the book showing why it's absolutely necessary, whether you like it or not, we will need geoengineering. So we should start looking at what's safe and what's feasible and all of that. Anyway, get the book.
What is the citation again?
It's called Intervention Earth, and his name is Gwyn Dyer. Last name is like David, D-Y-E-R. His first name is Gwyn, but it's not spelled like the women do. It's spelled Gwynne. He's Canadian, but he mostly lives in England. I will be very happy to have everybody concerned about the things that he is addressing in that book. And I was already working on that. I have been for several years actually very concerned about trying to promote the notion that we have to look at technological solutions as well as climate carbon reduction solutions. And his notion and mine is that right now the biggest challenge is to change public opinion, because public opinion slightly tends to be favorable to it. The scientific world, it's not been discussed properly, and people are convinced that all of these technological solutions are very dangerous. Some of them may be. We just have to find out which ones, and it's important to do that by getting busy right now. So we both believe that the important thing is to influence the public discourse on this so that we get people discussing it, because we absolutely urgently need to start looking into these technologies. They're probably not any of them ready to be deployed right now, but have to get onto it because we're going to need them very fast, whether we like it or not. So I had decided that one way to get people interested in a subject, and the way that I'm familiar with, because I'm a former professor, is to teach a course. And there are various platforms that offer courses on all kinds of subjects. Everything you might want to know, you can take a course on. I looked into it about 5 years ago to look into teaching a course on peace or war and peace or something on something called edX, which is a consortium of universities that give the courses taught by their faculty members. But I couldn't get anywhere because I had already retired, and they only let people teach courses who are still in the business of teaching courses. So I couldn't do it. But there's another one called Coursera, which is not quite as elite as the university's edX thing, but it's much more popular. I think they have something like 20 million people worldwide who've taken or are taking their courses. And you pay to take a course, and then you can even get a university degree if you take enough of them and graduate. But there's a third one, and that Coursera one is also, they would make it difficult for me because of my age and my having been retired for a while. But there's a third one, it's called Udemy, which is not nearly as popular as Coursera or edX, but nevertheless has something like, I think, 2 million people taking courses from it. And this Udemy one specializes primarily in people who want to take courses, not university type of courses, but skills courses. How to become a wedding photographer, how to learn Python coding, that kind of thing. How to become a good manager in your corporation, that sort of thing. But they do have some, academically interesting courses, and it's worth getting into them. So I decided that I would like to offer a course using the clips from the interviews that I have done over the past 6 years on my talk show. I have now done almost 600 of these shows. I think the Gwynne Dyer Forum is number 595 or 94 rather, 94. But I have a fifth one now, and so on. In fact, I think the one I did Sunday, the Global Town Hall, will be 596. We are really getting toward to 600 shows. And from those, I have taken clips to, I've decided that we need to talk about just one, probably the easiest of the geoengineering technologies. The easiest in the sense that it's the one that nobody has any complaints about. When you hear about it at all, everybody can see all of the excellent advantages to it, and there's hardly any reason to worry. There's nothing bad has any probability of occurring as a result of doing it. So there are no downsides, and people don't resist it. Whereas if you talk about spraying sulfur into the stratosphere, you're going to get a lot of resistance. So I don't want to start with something that's that challenging. In fact, I'm not sure I believe in it. But let's start with something that we could, get people to easily see the value of. So I've put together a course, which is going to be free of charge. Because I want to experiment to make sure I can do this, and I'm doing it for free for one. After that, if it works, I'll charge for it. But, or rather, Project Save the World will charge for it because I'm doing this as Project Save the World, not as Meta Spencer. But at any rate, we will have a course on how to become an influential activist in promoting soil amendments for climate change. It is possible to remove carbon from the atmosphere and from the oceans and put it into a form which you can put into the soil, and it will stay there if you do it right a very long time, and it will improve the quality of the soil, and it will improve the quality of the food that we produce, and it will reduce the need for fertilizer, which we can't afford to keep on using at the rate we've been using. And it will remove carbon from the atmosphere in big time. Not enough to solve our problem completely by any means, but to make a real dent, a significant dent in it, just by using the technologies that are readily available and achievable. So this is a 5-lesson course for free, aimed at people who want to become influential activists in trying to make other people aware of and create enhance the public discourse on the use of soil amendments to reduce climate change. And I have worked on it for probably about almost 2 months now, trying to put the thing together. I'm sure the next one will be easier, but this one, just 5 lessons, and it was a lot of work. But I've learned now how to put this thing together, and I have submitted it as of yesterday for review by Udemy. I think I've sent all the components they want, and I expect within a couple of days I will get approval. And when I get the approval, then I will release I will change the text a little bit in Peace Magazine because I'm telling people how to enroll in the course and why they should try to get all of their friends to enroll, and for free. And it doesn't take much time. The whole course you can do within, well, maybe maximum 15 hours work over, period of months, a month or so. I would say do one lesson per week. It will take you 2 hours per lesson, something like that. In all, with listening to this 20-minute compilation of clips from my talk shows and a little bit of reading. It's mostly magazine articles, very easy reading, and some assignments where you're supposed to do some. That the most of the time involved it asks you to go out and actually do some work. Either go to the library and figure out how to, or from your computer, go to your library on your computer and look out how to get in touch with certain people, how to organize a meeting, and then how to make a video and send it to your friends and so on. So lots of little tips on how, or technologies, or rather methods of being an activist, how to do it. And so these are little assignments, and people, there are 5 lessons, so each one will take a couple of hours each. Here comes Richard Jensen, a little bit late, but he's going to wonder what in the world I'm talking about. So that's it. I'll put it in the magazine, and you'll be able to see it there, and you'll also be able to read the edited version of the conversation I had with Gwen Dyer about global warming. Paul Werbos, please speak.
Yeah. First, a small thing. I checked the climate damage. I sent you before by email the latest paper by Ward and Wadhams. Probably it should be posted on what the damage is, how serious the climate risk is. But you just mentioned something that I don't think of as geoengineering. That's just semantics. I think of it as agriculture and related, which to me is one of the 5 big areas, just as important as geoengineering, maybe even more. It's a big and important area. I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've had a hell of a lot of disappointments. Government after government is doing dangerous things. My biggest exception, I sent a message of congratulations to one group that I think did something happy and good, and it was in the agriculture and related sector. There are people in Brazil who somehow have made contact with people in The Hague and in France about how we can radically change the practices in the agricultural sector so that instead of becoming a 20% addition to CO2 emission, it becomes a 20% sink. And instead of trying to kill the cows can help us because there's sequestration of carbon in the soil, and with the correct practices, you can do substantial things. And it was exciting that people at the highest level in Brazil are beginning to support this activity in Brazil, and Macron seems to be supporting it and listening. This was the biggest positive news I had in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure if I probe further, I'll discover they haven't done everything you can do, but hey, it's a very good start. The people in Brazil you should learn about, because to teach how to do it, I wanted to have a section on agriculture and related in the IEEE book when I was going to do this IEEE book. And the hardest part of getting that section together was that there were like 10 different people around the world who had their own personal thing, and nobody that really could do justice to the big picture and what are the real options and what matters. The biggest exception was a guy in Brazil who only spoke Portuguese. And it was a crisis. How the hell do you do a book in English if the guy you depend on only speaks Portuguese? But they've started to build this coalition. Now that they got rid of the Bolsonaro guy, they've started rebuilding the coalition that looks like it could really even save the world in the agricultural sector. And another important part is those big solar farms don't work so well in Canada. They would work great in South America. But the agricultural sector really could work in Canada. There are incredible applications for what the indigenous people in Brazil have learned to help the people in Canada and really change the economics.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you've said. Yes, and I think Joan Kerr.
Hi there. I disregard my other comments. I agree that. By the way, congratulations for the course. First of all, I think it's fantastic. I love action, and this is an action where people. As you know, I have the Climate Smart Victory Garden as my project. And we did a demonstration project for over 12 years to teach people how to do exactly what you're saying, because so many Canadians that we found, I'm not going to say Canadians, well, in GTA, we worked with a lot of them. They knew nothing about how to grow food, forget soil and composting, and so carbon sequestration is like speaking Latin to them. So we did what we call friendly projects, and adopted the Victory Garden, but put our own innovation on it called Climate Smart. And so I actually belong to an international group that does climate smart agriculture. And one of our climate smart biggest part of it is the soil, the healthy soil. So I think that because people just don't know how to grow food, they really don't. It seems so simple, but they don't. And I grow my own food, and we're growing them already. And we just used up our last jar of pickles. You know,
the value of this particular promotion that I'm doing is that it's not just traditional methods of agriculture, but it involves rock dust, for example. What is called enhanced rock weathering, because that's how nature does it. How nature takes excess CO2 out of the atmosphere is with rain. The rain falls through the air, picking up the carbon, absorbing the carbon, turns it into fizz water, carbonated water, which slightly carbonated. It falls on rocks. The rocks have minerals in it that combine with the fizz water. This runs off into the ocean. Along the way, it can do some good things, but it gets to the ocean, and the shellfish make it into shells, and then eventually their shells fall off to the bottom of the ocean and stay there a few million years, an eon, until something brings the bottom of the ocean to the surface or makes it into rocks. So that's that's the history of geohistory. That's fine, except it takes too long, and we have to find a way to make it quicker. So all you do is smash the rocks, because rocks, if pulverized, have more surface area. Therefore, the rain falling on it can absorb more of the minerals and therefore lock the carbon take the carbon out of the atmosphere, lock it, make it into a thing that can be put into the soil, rather than, you don't let it run off to the ocean, you put it in your soil. And it enriches the soil. It makes extra chemical fertilizers unnecessary, and it makes our food healthier. And
you just answered a question for a curiosity of mine. My great grandmother was a really good farmer, and she used to tell me, put the rocks in the garden. She no scientific reason. She just said it was good, and I've always done it and I tell people because my grandmother said. It was full of nutrients. But Paul, I wanted to say, I just wanted to pick up on something. I don't know if you do know, but I am the IEEE Smart Village VP for North America. So I have been for the last 4 years. And PES, IEEE PES is one of our sponsors for our projects. And and there's also a collaboration between Smart Village and Rotary International that also looks at agriculture. And I know that PES is looking at the technology to solve a lot of the agricultural problems. Of course, that's going to be a big sell in Africa, but in any case, it's, both of you, I would like to work with you on, I'm more of a community engagement questioner than I'm not a scientist. So, and I'm not an engineer.
Let's get concrete if they don't mind. Meta, if you don't mind, we should get concrete because IEEE is one of those forces which could help break the logjam.
Yes, I was going to say that.
You know what would be wonderful if all three of you got together and got IEEE to urge people to take this little one course, and then that's only going to be the first of a number of courses that I prepare. But it's going to take a while, to do it. As a matter of fact,
to ask that is not to know IEEE, but anyway.
Secret, I hope. I don't want to say that. I mustn't say this. Knock on wood. Maybe Gwen Dyer and I will do something together on this. Okay. Wouldn't that be neat? Anyway, that is don't tell anybody. It's way too hopeful too. But there we go.
But the point I was going to make at the end, Meta, is that I actually have developed a course for not what you're doing, but for people to grow food and carbon and healthy soil is part of them to make it climate smart, because the climate smart also has the technology side of it, not just the growing side. So if you need any help, I don't know anything about geoengineering, but I just always put rocks in my garden. So.
Good. Well, smash them. That helps.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you a lot. And Richard is just arriving, and he's wondering why I mentioned Gwen Dyer, because Gwen Dyer and I had lunch the other day and then did a talk show, and I'm editing the transcript of that conversation, and it will be in Peace Magazine. And you'll see it there. Anyway, you have your hand up. What would you like to say?
Well, I was just wondering where we could find your conversation with Gwen Dyer in Peace Magazine. That's great. If Paul and Joan could just also read the chat and put in your links to the various articles and explain what IEE or IEEE is. I'm in Rotary, and in Rotary, we're also promoting pollinating gardens to help the environment as well. Thank you.
Fine. Okay. Instead of the chat, Richard, I'd encourage you to post it on our members only page in the tosavetheworld.ca. That way, all members can see it. Or you can, if you really want more attention for a public place, put it in on the page. Go into tosavetheworld.ca. Look at the thing that says discuss the threats, and pick the threat that you think is most relevant. Click on that, and then scroll down to the comments column, so where you can have your discussion, and you can post as much as long articles or whatever you want, and take a look at what other people are posting. I should add one thing that I didn't tell you, that Gwen and I talk largely about his new book, which you can buy today if you have a Kindle, or you can get it sent to you today. It's already out in Canada, and it's called Intervention Earth, and it's about geoengineering. Okay? Lynn Adamson. Yes, Lynn.
Thank you. I know, I'm willing to look at your materials about geoengineering in this book. I'm interested in. I'll just let everybody know that I'm actually I'm a co-chair of the City of Toronto Climate Advisory Group. And within that group, which is 26 people with lots of various expertise coming together 4 times a year, and then having working groups that meet in between. And we have working groups. We may set one up on energy. We have one right now on buildings, transportation, waste, intergovernmental, to try to get some help from other levels of government, because we're at the city level, which doesn't have the resources really to do everything we want to do. Anyway, I'm on that climate advisory group and co-chair right now, and I'm interested in, accessing the kind of information that will help our working groups get things, moving quickly at our city, because we are not reducing emissions. This won't come as a surprise. Our emissions are up 8% overall in the GTHA, and they have to go down 9% every year in order to achieve our targets. And the electricity emissions are worse. They're up 26% because of the increasing reliance on gas-fired electricity. So there's a lot we're working on to try to get gas out of our system. And at the province of Ontario, we are currently in a big fight with them about the gas in new installations in suburbs, which they really want to do, versus more economic and environmental ways to heat homes. So there's many levels that we're working on, but in terms of, I'm excited to learn about from Paul that there's this area we want. As far as geoengineering, though, I did want to ask a couple of things. One is, what about? I thought that we could use algae or seaweed or something like in the oceans to draw down. Like, I know we have to draw down carbon, but I much prefer methods of drawing it down. And I was wondering if what you were talking about was biochar as one of the agricultural methods.
Yes. The course, by the way, is about using soil amendments. That's what I described. Soil amendments which put carbon into the soil and make it stay there, because if you just put it in there, it's going to wash away. You have to put it in with biochar, which will hold it there. The biochar is like a big sponge, and it'll keep these minerals and lock it up for a long time.
So it's a combination.
Yes, and seaweed is an extremely important addition too, as a soil amendment. So the point of my suggestion, it's not the only possibility, but my suggestion is to combine rock dust, seaweed, and biochar in some various combinations. But you should pay attention to the kind of soil you have, so you don't just throw everything in. You pay attention to what it needs and put it in your soil. And those three things work together extremely well in handling all three things: removing carbon from the atmosphere with rock dust, and removing carbon from the oceans with seaweed. And then the biochar holds it in place. It doesn't fertilize. It's not a fertilizer. It contains carbon itself, which has been removed. You've removed it from the atmosphere by pyrolyzing, turning it into charcoal. In other words, you take wood and turn it into charcoal. The wood doesn't therefore rot and go back into the atmosphere, but it stays in a charcoal form, which can be put in the soil and exist and remain there for thousands of years. Right. That's how we discovered it in South America, in Brazil, where the Indians had built up very rich soil in what was otherwise very thin, impoverished soil.
Right. And the other one was also something that I think Paul brought up, or maybe you did, Meta, but about the agricultural impact of animals, so animal agriculture on the land. Now, it strikes me that it might be dependent on locale around the world where it is beneficial and where it's actually maybe not so beneficial. I'd like to know more about all of that, because I do think the agriculture is very neglected. We talk about fossil fuels all the time. 25% is agriculture, and we need to talk about it.
And the difference between plus 20 and minus 20 is just as big as anything else.
Sorry, Paul, what did you say?
The difference between plus 20 and minus 20 makes agriculture as big as the other big ones, which are making electricity. It's just
plus 20 to minus 20 is a good way to describe the potential. And I don't know, like I'm doing the work in a city context, so our agriculture is like community gardens, rooftop gardens. It's not huge, but we eat a lot. the city of Toronto consumes a lot of food. So figuring out how, and also Ontario, how to ensure that we keep our agricultural lands and how we use them is all extremely important. So, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I agree that the question about animals, herding animals is extremely important, but I'm not going to try to include that in this course.
No, I
Want to
think
take only
probably
a
not, but
very small, one little intervention that people could become smart enough about to talk to their friends and relatives and so on, and hammer home that they can make a difference influencing people on that. And and it's the easiest one of the lot. There are a lot of other things that also need to be talked about, and we will get to those in other courses when I get time to do it. But let's start with the easiest one, and I think that the easiest one is soil amendments.
which will have immediate impacts. Right?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
the easiest to convince people because there's nobody who really opposes it. They just don't think about it, but there's nobody saying you're crazy for doing it, whereas a lot of these other things, people will say you have to be a nutcase in order to believe in it, that we have a harder time. It's a harder lift.
So, Meta, do you have any promotional literature so we can send to people? I'm going to sign up. I'm your first student. I'm signing up. I can never learn enough about soil as far as I'm concerned.
Because it hasn't been approved yet. I've been up the publication of Peace Magazine till I get the approval, and then I'll put the right URL in where you can go sign up, and we have an ad already made up for it.
Fantastic. So I'd be happy to promote it.
Yeah,
and Lynn, I just wanted to say, Lynn, I just wanted to say that I ran a Victory Garden, community garden for 12 years in Oshawa, and also helped start the Durham Regional Network for community gardens as well. I'm not involved in it so much anymore because we've gone international, teaching people how to do climate smart Victory Gardens because it's more accepted in Africa and South Asia than it is in North America. It will come here whether they resist it or not, because it addresses climate, smart technologies, and nutrition. But just want to let you know that I've been involved in community gardens for a long time.
Great, thank you. I think Paul, you had your hand up. Joan, are you putting yours?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Paul first, and then Joan.
Paul. First, one small thing, not so small really. When I hear Joan Kerr speak, and I look for opportunities to do something important, I get the subversive idea that maybe I should help her take over, become the new boss of the entire IEEE Climate Book Project. And maybe we should discuss that. My email, you guys should know, it's paul.werbos@gmail.com. I don't want to forget it. I'm going to be leaving the U.S. in a week, but damn it, this is a critical project. I had to leave the Climate Book Project because I made an invention, and a patent lawyer told me it all depends on me. I made an invention in an area you might call quantum AI, a new level of artificial intelligence. I'm the only person on the earth who understands it, and therefore I have a duty full-time to try to explain it to people. And yet this climate thing I've neglected. We have resources and data that are being wasted. If Joan wants to become the new guru, I would love to help her and support her. Now, in terms of the specific question about agriculture in the ocean, I think that was the question someone asked.
Yes.
Okay. In organizing the books, energy is complicated. If we pretend it's not complicated, we'll be stupid. And the way we try to organize it is 5 major sections. Agriculture and related is one. Transportation is another. It turns out that these algae fuel fits under transportation. And the transportation part of the book and the making electricity part of the book were the closest to being complete when I had to leave the project. We have information on how to get rid of greenhouse gas from transportation, including fuel. And the algae fuel fit into that section. There is industry support. It's one of the rare cases where there is big industry that can help you if you propose something useful and want to propagate it. It is one of the real options, and we could discuss it forever, but you don't want me to talk forever, so I'll shut up.
Thank you. Okay, Joan Montgomery, and then we're way over time, but that's fine. Go on.
This might be too detailed a question, but getting down to the nitty gritty, when you are putting the black rocks in the soil to stay there for a long time, then the machine comes along to plant seeds. It's turning out the soil over all the time. And so your black rocks are, are going to be broken up and become part of the food chain, are they not?
Well, there are many things in that question. Number one, we hope people stop doing that, turning over the soil. Of course, we have to figure out how to garden without it. But ideally, you don't turn the soil over, because all that does is it exposes the carbon that's in the soil already, and it goes back into the air where you don't want it to go. So you want it to keep there. Now, the thing about the black rocks is they just are the same as if you go to the store and you buy some charcoal briquettes to use for your barbecue. That's basically what this stuff is.
Yes.
The biochar is just stuff that's like sponge, only it's solidified. It's very crisp and so on.
Yes, and
now this all it absorbs stuff, and it will anything goes near it, it sticks to it. So that's it. It'll just pick up anything around. So if you put your rich minerals that you've made from your smashing your rocks, if you put them in the soil along with the biochar, the biochar grabs it and holds on to it. The biochar does not evaporate. It's not, unless you wash it away through a flood or something. It will stay in the soil. And in South America, there are places where the soil is 6 feet deep, black, rich soil that's made from exactly that. The towns of Indians living there took their garbage and incinerated it and put it out there, and it just kept piling it up until it's been there thousands of years, and it will stay there another few thousand. So we can make that happen to our soil as well by using biochar.
Yes.
Joan, have I described it accurately? I think you may know.
You have, and I remember discussing this with you. Yeah. Oh, this Joan, which Joan? I remember discussing this with you 8 or 9 years ago about that black char.
Yeah.
But I can't see Canadian wheat farmers planting one seed at a time in the soil so that it's just going down one tiny hole. That's not the way it would likely happen. So I just think that's going to be a slight complication.
Well,
although they could look at technology to address that by making holes with a big piece of equipment, having as little impact as possible. Of course, there's a compacting of the soil as well. That would be an issue. But, these big factory farms need to change how they do things anyway.
Yes.
So,
yeah. That's a whole very important conversation, but this isn't the time for it.
No.
Okay. It is now 18 minutes past our witching hour. So if anybody has anything you want to add, I just say it now, because I want to thank you all. Anybody with another thought of any kind that you need to communicate? I don't see any hands. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, a quick comment was made on agriculture, because this is an area where Canada could have a very big impact. And when we learn from Brazil, it's important. Biochar is maybe about half of it. And the Brazilians talk about how to incorporate biochar into an effective strategy for managing big agricultural plants. But just as important as biochar is the role of cows. When I handled climate for one of the senators back when Obama was trying to pass laws, everybody knew cows were bad. Everybody knew it. There were pictures on the wall showing pictures of cows saying unregulated point source of methane, and everybody thinks that. I believed them because I had access to all the best climate experts in the world in the office where I was. And a friend of mine in the international community said, be careful who you believe. There is other information. And I checked out the other information. People running farms in a different way. And it's more a matter of how you treat the cows. It's not your climate, it's how do you treat your cows. And I looked up the scientific literature. The best scientific paper I found was something called the Stella model. And I looked it up and I was amazed. The strongest scientific literature says that cows are a substantial help if you treat them right. And by the way, you make more money if you treat them right also. It's only because of bad economic, wrong incentives, giving bribes to the wrong people that it may ever look otherwise. Treating the cows right actually makes you money. It's productive and it's good for the environment. And I'm really glad there are some people I know in Brazil who are beginning to follow up on that.
Thank you, Paul. I would love to join that conversation because I got a million things to say about what you just said. But our time is up and we do have to think of other. I have to go back to Gwen Dyer and editing, and you guys have things of your own to do. So
Thank you. It was very nice.
Get back
So,
together.
Paul, we should get together at some point.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
I will send Joan at least some beginning on this IEEE idea.
Okay.
Fabulous. Bless you all. This has been a great session. I've learned a lot, and I think everybody has benefited from it. So bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.